In the first part of this video, I went more in detail about how our social life and behavior could change our internal state and how it could affect our testosterone levels. This part will focus a lot more on the lifestyle and how it affects testosterone, because we know lifestyle is important, but I want to go deeper in why these things are the way they are. A very common one is exercise, but I want to go deeper into which types of exercise increase testosterone more specifically, because everyone knows that lifting heavy weights increase testosterone. But what specific types of exercise increase testosterone and which don't really increase it, and why do they increase testosterone? Now first, let's clarify why it is that weightlifting in general reduces testosterone for a short period of time. The basic explanation is that there's a stress response, a mechanical stress response and a metabolic stress response. Your body will, after enough stress, release testosterone, growth hormone and IGF-1 to basically repair the muscle and make it grow stronger. The range of the amount of stress is also important. Too little stress will not trigger any release of any hormone, or it's going to be a very minor one, but too much stress or overtraining will kill your testosterone as a signal for the body to not do it again. You don't want to be overtrained, whether it's cardio overtraining or weightlifting overtraining. Now, what types of exercise more specifically increase your testosterone? Usually there's going to be a lot of different parameters involved, like short sessions will increase testosterone more than long sessions, more reps, more sets, etc. There's no specific exercise that's going to increase testosterone, but there are two main factors that will boost testosterone the most, and these are intensity and volume. Testosterone will be released with both factors, and growth hormone is going to be released mainly with intensity. This is why you will see exercises like sprints and squats being very effective for releasing testosterone. These types of exercises or rep ranges that are either intense, voluminous, or both are going to be the ones that increase testosterone the most. It's the exercises that will challenge you the most that will increase testosterone the most, and of course you don't want to go too hard and overtrain, but that's the main principle to keep in mind. Another factor to keep in mind is the social aspect of training, because believe it or not, there will be more testosterone and endorphins released while training in a group of people. Things that you will experience with people are that you also might have a competition aspect, which I explained in the first part of this video to be very important for testosterone release. There's going to be a challenge aspect, which means that if you are surrounded with people, you're more likely to push yourself further and thus release more testosterone. If you do decide to follow this advice of training in a group, make sure to choose your training partner or training partners wisely, because it's a double-edged sword. You might have a great partner pushing you further and further, but you also might have someone that's not going to push you further and that's actually going to encourage you to go easier. So you have to be careful with this. Now with all that said, I'm going to disappoint you, because testosterone increases during weightlifting, but it goes back down to normal levels after about an hour. This is something that nobody really talks about, but yes, weightlifting does increase testosterone, but for a very small period of time. Something to know is that both extremes are bad for testosterone. On one side, you have the majority of the population that is overweight or even obese. What happens is that there's an enzyme called aromatase. This aromatase gets created by a bunch of different things, but also a lot by fat tissue. What aromatase does is it turns androgen or testosterone into estrogen, meaning the fatter you are, the more estrogen and less testosterone you'll have, which can then cause you to form man boobs, feel more depressed, feel more anxious, or have decreased libido. These are all consequences of having lower testosterone. I personally don't really care about everything that happens in your body, but my personal reason why a fat man would have low testosterone is because you're not supposed to be fat. Your body is not going to reward you for sitting on your ass and eating Krispy Kreme. Of course you're going to have lower testosterone and feel like crap. But yeah, that's my non-scientific analysis. But you will also experience sometimes even drastic drops in testosterone when you go too far on the other extreme. It's not uncommon to see natural bodybuilders have their testosterone levels crushed when dieting for a show and getting to 7 or 8% body fat. When you get to this point, you will experience drops in testosterone, but also extreme hunger, low libido, bad sleep, low energy, and all sorts of things that come when you have lower testosterone. The best thing you can do is keep yourself in an average body fat percentage, which is going to depend from individual to individual, but usually that body fat percentage is going to be around the 10 to 20% range. Some people will feel better at 18% and others will feel good at 11%. It depends from person to person. That is the range where you will have the most optimal testosterone levels and feel the best. Many factors in your diet can positively or negatively impact your testosterone levels. You may think you have the perfect diet, but it might not be optimal for testosterone production. So that's what I want to discuss in this part. I want to go over the building blocks of testosterone, which nutrients are absolutely necessary, and why you shouldn't eat some things. If there is one advice that would be applicable to everybody, and that would probably be the single best advice you need for a diet, is that your diet should be made out of only whole foods and that you can maintain. So basically you want to have a diet that is made out of natural foods like fish, meat, vegetable, potatoes, rice, etc. And that is sustainable. There's no point in eating perfectly healthy if you can't stick to it, but that's not the point of this video. Now, there is something that is killing your testosterone in most people's diet, and it's sugar. When I talk about sugar, I don't mean the ones that you can find in fruits. I'm talking about the added sugars in all the junk food that we have. So the way sugar decreases our testosterone is by increasing our insulin resistance. Every processed sugar is going to increase your insulin resistance, and many studies have shown that this increase in insulin is associated with lower testosterone levels. A side effect of sugar is that it will also make you addicted to the food, meaning you'll eat more of it, meaning you'll get fatter, meaning your testosterone will drop because you got fatter, which I explained before. A second thing that will kill your testosterone levels are nutrient deficiencies, and more so cholesterol deficiency. All the advice you heard of cholesterol being bad might be true if you have way too high amounts of it, but we need cholesterol to be able to function properly, have normal hormonal function, and many more. The majority of our cholesterol is going to be produced by our body itself, and the cholesterol we take in is going to be around 20 to 25% of our total cholesterol depending on how much you eat of it. Cholesterol is one of the main building blocks of testosterone and therefore crucial for testosterone production. But there are also types of food that will increase testosterone. A study has been done where they calculated the inflammatory effect of foods in the body with the dietary inflammatory index. This is an index where they take the foods you eat and assign it a score based on how inflammatory it is. This study showed that there is a correlation between higher inflammatory foods and lower testosterone production in the testicles. These foods don't necessarily cause this lower production, but there is a strong correlation between both. The foods you want to focus on are fish, complex carbs like rice or oatmeal, vegetables and fruits. Things to avoid will be things like butter and olive oil. To make it simple, the best diet you can have has enough cholesterol and nutrients, avoids processed sugars and processed foods in general, and focuses on a healthy balanced diet that has every food group. This is very basic advice, but now you understand where it all comes from. We know the importance of sleep for just being able to live properly, for tissue repair, for psychological aspects and much more. But how does it affect testosterone and our hormones in general? Because there is also the release of growth hormone. Now we know that sleep is divided into different cycles that last around 90 to 110 minutes, and these cycles are then divided into two different phases, the REM phase and the non-REM phase. These stand for rapid eye movement and non-rapid eye movement. The non-REM phase is then also divided into three phases called N1, N2 and N3. The general knowledge is that there will be more testosterone and less cortisol released when you have a good night of sleep, and the opposite will happen if you have a bad night of sleep. Testosterone will be released during the whole night, and we can see changes during non-REM sleep. But when you look at the peaks in testosterone released during the night, it will be right before we go into REM sleep and during REM sleep itself. These are the times when testosterone will be released the most. Now, how much does bad sleep decrease testosterone? A study showing that young men sleeping 5.5 hours or less for 8 nights had on average 10 to 15% less testosterone production. Another study showed that men with 4 hours of sleep had around 200 to 300 nanograms per deciliter in the morning, and the guys that had 8 hours of sleep had around 500 to 700 nanograms per deciliter in the morning. Now, of course, these are studies and we can't really know the accuracy of this, but in general, a 10 to 15 decrease in testosterone after a bad night is what you would expect. You don't have to stress about this because the next, you'll have a good night of sleep and you will get back to higher levels. Sun exposure is very important for testosterone production, but there's also people that will tell you that supplementing with vitamin D is enough. Supplementing with vitamin D is very good advice and can be very useful in some specific situations where you live in a country where the sun doesn't shine that much, or during the winter for example. These are scenarios where supplementing with vitamin D will be very useful, but in general, if you can expose yourself to sunlight, it's going to be a better alternative. Saying that supplementing with vitamin D is enough to replace sunlight is like saying that protein shakes are enough to replace a healthy, balanced diet. It doesn't work that way. You can't just take vitamin D and not get outside anymore. Vitamin D will only serve in case you can't access sunlight easily. Things you will experience when you don't get enough sunlight are, for example, low energy, poor bone health, bad mood, and many more. When it comes to bad mood, it's not a coincidence that people have seasonal depression. The way sunlight increases testosterone in men and estrogen in women is because the UV contact on the skin will trigger the brain to release testosterone or estrogen. It will also make you more assertive and more romantic. The more skin you expose to the sun, the better. If you can lay down naked in your garden, go for it. A study even found that the sun exposure increased the desire for male-female interaction and female attractiveness to males. Women will release more pheromones when they expose themselves to sunlight more often. The recommended amount of sunlight per day for increasing testosterone would be around 20 to 30 minutes. That's going to be enough sunlight for the day. But usually the more sun exposure, the better. The more you can get outside, the better you will feel. Now of course this doesn't mean that the more you expose yourself to the sun, the more testosterone you'll produce, but it's a lack of sunlight that will kill it. So when it comes to testosterone and sunlight, try going for actual sunlight instead of vitamin D, although you can do both, and try to get outside as much as you can. Testosterone is very responsive to challenges. Whenever you are exposed to something you haven't done yet or is challenging for you, you will get a testosterone boost to get you through the challenge. This could be a challenging workout or a small competition. Usually it's going to be more during a physical challenge rather than a mental challenge, but things that will challenge you in general will raise your testosterone. This of course only applies during the challenge. If you see the challenge and you decide not to engage in it, you won't get the testosterone boost. This lack of challenge is in the long run going to further lower testosterone. It's cyclical, meaning that the people with higher testosterone are more likely to engage in challenges and in other testosterone boosting activities, which is then going to raise their testosterone even further, and people with lower testosterone are less likely to engage in challenges, which will then further decrease their testosterone. The more testosterone you have, the easier it is to further increase it. Testosterone is a sex-seeking behavior, but it's interesting to look at how different stages of sex impact testosterone levels and how other sexual practices can influence this hormone. The three main different types of sexual behavior are going to be watching. This can be in real life or porn. The second is the act of having sex and how testosterone levels change before, during, and after the act. And the third is semen retention or nofap. This is a practice where you retain from ejaculating and try to preserve your sexual energy. You can find online nofap communities that try to fight off their porn addiction, try to control their lust, and take a step back from our sexualized society. The first is going to be watching the sexual act. This of course in almost all cases is going to be pornography. I can't really imagine a scenario where it would happen in real life. During the observation, man had a slight increase of about 10% in testosterone. This is a very minor change since it drops right after. Also the fact that you're watching it turns something in your brain that will start to see you as lesser, as more beta, and in turn this will decrease your testosterone. This has nothing to do with the scientific literature, but it's about evolutionary psychology. With the act of having sex, it's going to be a more drastic increase of about 70%. The period before sex will definitely already increase testosterone levels, but the sex itself increases it by 70%. Now the third part of sex is the ejaculation part. When the man ejaculates at the end, he will not experience a drop in testosterone, but there will be an increase in prolactin, which is going to stop that man from having sex again for a certain period of time. It's also going to lower your energy and promote the whole nervous system towards calm. That time will be dependent on how long prolactin is high. Now when the man doesn't ejaculate during sex, he will experience an increase of about 400% in testosterone after a week of doing this practice. You will see a lot of thumbnails on YouTube claiming that semen retention is going to give you that 400% boost, but it's doing semen retention while having sex and doing that for a week or more that's going to give you that boost. Now of course the last is semen retention itself without the sexual intercourse. Although you will see an increase in testosterone, the majority of the benefits don't come from this. This practice will be more about learning to control your lust, fighting your addiction to pornography, and relearning your perception of what sex should be. This increase is never going to be as high as if you did it whilst having sex. I don't think I ever saw anyone increase their testosterone levels by 400% just doing semen retention, and I never felt like it went times 4 when I did it myself, so be mindful of that. As I said before, testosterone is very responsive to challenges. Testosterone is also a hormone that gives you more energy, more muscle, less fat, better mood, and many more. But the most important ones are the increased energy levels and better mood. These ones are important because laziness is probably not a personality trait, but more a lack of testosterone. If you've been laying down on the couch before and didn't feel like going to the gym, you know how hard it feels to get up and go. That's the exact opposite of what testosterone does. Again, it's cyclical, meaning that the more unlazy things you do, the more you will repeat that process. When you do something that boosts testosterone, you're more likely to do things that will boost testosterone even further, making it easier to do things that require you not to be lazy. The lack of ambition can also be a cause of low testosterone. When you give yourself a big challenge, a big goal to achieve, you're challenging yourself. You're giving your body a reason to push yourself. Testosterone likes challenges, and being ambitious is a big challenge. So when you have lower testosterone, you will realize that your drive to do things and achieve things is a lot lower. In party environments, there's a lot of things like alcohol, drugs, and smoking. So I was wondering how a lifestyle like this and how each of them affected your testosterone. Parties and the nightlife have, in my opinion, more negatives on testosterone than positives, because you do sleep like shit, but you're exposed to a lot of social challenges which have been shown to increase testosterone. You might be in a more competitive environment, which then also increase testosterone. But my real question is to look at alcohol, drugs, and smoking more specifically. Although alcohol is known to have serious effects on your brain and body, it can have big negative effects on testosterone production. It has been shown that a very small amount of alcohol will have a slight increase in testosterone of about 17% after 2 to 3 drinks, but as you go further and further, you can see that testosterone drops more and more, and this is without considering the brain degeneration and other negative side effects of alcohol. A study found that drunk people had a 45% decrease in testosterone. In women, this effect of alcohol on testosterone is 5 times less, since the effect of alcohol on testosterone is mostly because of the presence of the nuts. Drugs will also have indirect negative effects on testosterone. This depends on the drugs, of course, and this excludes steroids obviously. We're talking about things like marijuana and stuff. Again, it depends on the drug, but some will have an increase in prolactin, which is the same effect that you have after you bust a nut. These drugs can increase something called aromatase, which turn testosterone into estrogen, which can then cause things like gynecomastia to occur. Another question is whether cigars increase testosterone. Since Andrew Tate claimed they did, many did their research to see if it was real. It's kinda true directly and indirectly, but the side effects outweigh the benefits. What happens is that nicotine blocks aromatase, which I explained turns testosterone into estrogen, so less aromatase means less testosterone turned into estrogen. Now there are things that could indirectly increase testosterone too, since cigars are a stress reliever and stress is a cause of lower testosterone. Cigars are usually smoked in groups, which adds a social aspect, which has been shown to increase testosterone. Although yes, it increases testosterone, smoking too often will have many more negative side effects than positives.